Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Ann Arbor District Library's Resume Workshop. My name is Katie, and I'll be working with you on this. Let me just move myself up here. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So here's the overview. In the overview, I'll talk about the format, and then I will take a look at the agenda and get started with talking about resumes. So this workshop will have two formats. You can choose whichever option works best for you and your needs. The first option is interactive. At different points during the workshop, there will be a slide that asks you to spend a few minutes writing down ideas to different questions. If you want to follow the interactive model, pause the video and set a timer for the amount of time specified. The second option is to find just what you need. So you can either watch the workshop without pausing the video at any point in time, or you can look in the video description below to find what time to jump to for specific sections. On the agenda today, first of all, I'll do a brief introduction and give an idea of what resumes are. Most of this workshop, however, will be about the important components that go into building a resume. After that, I'll talk a little bit about length, some design, and then just general tips. And at the very end, I'll have further resources for you. Let's go ahead and get started with what is a resume. A resume is designed to give potential employers a brief overview of your skills and job experiences to determine if you're a qualified candidate for the job. The most important concept to keep in mind when writing your resume is that you need to translate your past accomplishments into perceived future potential. These are 7 qualities that employers seek, so when writing your resume, keep these 7 qualities in mind. Showcase how you can think in terms of results, know how to get things done, are well-rounded, show signs of career progress and professional development, have personal standards of excellence, are flexible and willing to try new things, and communicate effectively. A lot of this comes into how you word your past experiences. There are 6 universal rules for resume writing. These come from Indeed.com. So you want to represent relevant skills and accomplishments. So this we'll talk more about later, but you want to make sure that you're only putting things that are relevant to the job that you're applying for. This is one of the most important things is use keywords from the job description. This is especially important if you're applying online. Be concise. Quantify your accomplishments. Read sample resumes in your field. And then proofread and proofread and proofread again. All right, let's go ahead and get started with the important components. The important thing to remember when composing your resume is that everything should be relevant to the job and should help you stand out. Include specific details and unique experiences. The first few components listed here are the most important. The others are optional and should be used based on the situation. During this part, we will begin building parts of the resume. If you have a resume that you want to work on and you're doing the interactive model, you can pull that out now and make changes or notes on it. Otherwise, just use a blank piece of paper or a blank document. Just a note on ordering sections. Order the education, work experience, and skill sections in the ways that will highlight what is most relevant to the job you are applying for. All right, so let's start with the contact information. This will always go at the top of your resume. You want your name at the top in large letters, so this will be larger than the font on the rest of your resume. You want to have a professional email, so that can be something like firstname.lastname@email provider, or it can also be something relevant to your work. Do not use an unprofessional email address like Harry Potter fan. You want to have your phone number, and then you can also include your mailing address, although this is optional. A lot of people opt to just do town or city and then state now if they include anything at all. Your name is the most important part, so make it stand out. Put it in a larger font size. Match the design with the rest of your resume. Use the same layout and font type. Triple check that all contact information is accurate. You don't want to miss a job interview just because a digit in your phone number was off or you forgot to add a letter in your email. If you want to include a mailing address and have two addresses, you can use the column function in Microsoft Word or in Google Docs to put one on the left and one on the right. That will help your resume look symmetrical and balanced. Moving on, the objective statement. I have actually heard varying opinions on the objective statement, which is why looking at resumes in your field is important. An objective statement is 1 to 3 lines that come immediately after your contact information and give an at-a-glance picture of you and your career interest. This will need to be catered to each job you apply to. Generally, if you're submitting a cover letter as well, you do not need an objective statement, but it can't hurt to have one. The objective statement emphasizes key qualifications, skills, and/or goals. It helps your readers find what they need quickly, makes a good first impression, and relates company goals to personal goals. So this is an example of an objective statement that's too general. An internship allowing me to utilize my knowledge and expertise in different areas. So this is a well-written statement. It's concise, but it also raises too many questions. It's really vague. What kind of internship? What kind of knowledge? What kinds of expertise? Which areas? And it also doesn't explain how this applicant will contribute to the company. Again, this is something you're going to have to cater for each job that you apply to. Just as a tip, you can look at a company's website, do a little bit of research ahead of time, and look at what their company values are and what their mission statement is, and try to relate that to your own personal goals in your objective statement. A good objective statement answers these questions. What position or positions are you applying for? What are your main qualifications? What are your career goals? What is your professional identity, and how can you help the company? You're basically trying to sell yourself here. You are the person that these employers have been looking for. You're the person to solve their problem right now. If you want to participate in the interactive model, pause the video on the next slide and set a timer for 5 minutes. Writing an objective statement. So these are just questions about you and questions about employers to get you thinking about writing an objective statement. Go ahead and pause the video now if you're doing the interactive model. If you want to participate in the interactive model, pause the video on the next slide and set a timer for 3 minutes. Here are some objective statements with sections left blank for you to fill in. These are just to help you get started. You can use more than one, or you can come up with your own if you feel comfortable. Go ahead and pause the video now if you're doing the interactive model. All right, moving on to job experience. This is probably one of the most important parts of the resume. This is where you're going to highlight that past experience translating to perceived future potential. What to include. So you want to list your job experiences and you put the most recent coming first, and then you go to past jobs. You want to include company name, the city and state, your position, and the years that you worked there. If you've had several jobs, keep in mind you want to use the ones that are going to be relevant. So unless it's going to leave huge gaps, you can leave things off. You can also, if you've had professional jobs, you don't need to include the job you had in high school working as a cashier, unless that's relevant to what you're doing now. Formatting. Use bullet points under each job to give an overview of what you did/do. Be as specific as possible. So don't just say managed employees, say manage a staff of up to 20. If you've had several past jobs, as I just said, include only those relevant to the job you're applying for. Don't understate yourself. Think about your experience professionally. So, for example, you could say answer the phone and wipe tables, but instead you could say acted as liaison between clients and legal staff, or created a healthy environment for customers and maintained a positive public image. So not only there are you showing that you're maintaining a healthy environment, so that's something you're interested in, but you're maintaining a positive public image. Those are both key words right there that are going to catch employers' eyes. So I wanted to cover some special circumstances. So I have self-employment, gig work, stay-at-home parent, and then also explaining gaps. So freelance or self-employed. Summarize all relevant self-employment history in one entry. If you've done freelance contract work in more than one industry, create 2 or more entries. Make sure that it matches the rest of your job experience section. Highlight key accomplishments, responsibilities, and projects, and don't be afraid to name drop if you have a notable client. Give yourself a job title that reflects the work you did and add freelancer, consultant, or contractor to the end. If your company has a name, include it. If not, just put your job title. Provide a summary of the services you offered. Highlight variety of services and industries if possible. Again, highlight noteworthy clients or projects. Gig work. It is okay to include gig work on a resume. Like any other job, you want to use this as an opportunity to highlight accomplishments and skills that will be an asset to the company you're applying to work with. Finding a temp/gig job can actually show initiative and determination, which are qualities that employers look for. Give yourself a good job title and highlight the skills, opportunities, and accomplishments that came with the job. However, if your intuition tells you that it might not be a good idea to include a certain job, then don't. Stay-at-home parent. Include previous work experience if you're a stay-at-home parent. Remember to include volunteer positions and freelance work. You can also include stay-at-home experience if it is relevant to the job you're applying to. So some people will actually put parenting as a job. So if the duties you did as a parent are relevant to the job you're applying for, go ahead and include it on your resume. If not, mention it in the cover letter so that way you can explain the gaps in your employment. You would list it at the top of your job experience if you're applying for a job straight out of being a stay-at-home parent. So like I said, you'd put the most recent job first, so that would go first. Give yourself a title like homemaker, house manager, or chief home officer. Include parenting skills in the skills section, schedule management, organizational skills, etc. Also, if you took any certification classes or college courses as a parent, include those under education. Possible skills include budgeting and expense control, logistics and project management, negotiations, team leadership, and motivation. These are just some job title ideas and descriptions from Business News Daily that I thought would be really helpful for getting people started. So project manager, private family office. Description: successfully managed the risk portfolio of a household and oversaw design and implementation of an extensive 12-month gut renovation, all while raising 2 children under the age of 2. Parenting expert. With 10 plus years experience as a marketing manager, I can now proudly add parenting a highly energized 3-year-old girl to my repertoire. Skills gained include working under intense pressure as well as superior efficiency of managing tasks within constantly changing and unforgiving timelines. You could also do something like career break. Took a career hiatus to raise my twins who are now in school full-time, allowing me to refocus on my career. Maintain my link with the industry by completing a refresher course in digital marketing, as well as an executive MBA module with a specific focus on marketing strategy. So there's an example of highlighting classes you took while you were on a career break. Head of budgeting. During a 4-year career break, I finessed my finance and budget management skills as acting treasurer at a prestigious Manhattan private school. So if you had any volunteer positions with your child's school, sports, etc., then you can include those as well. Gaps in employment. So if you have gaps in your employment, you can use that and highlight volunteer work or internships. Group similar freelance jobs under one job title. Use the bullet points to highlight the work you did for each client. Consider removing short-term jobs to make your resume less cluttered and allow you to focus on bigger jobs that are more relevant. A general rule is if the job lasted less than 3 months, you take it off. If the job is highly relevant to the one you're applying to, you might want to consider leaving it in. That's a judgment call for you. Invest time in professional development to show you have stayed connected and up to date. So if you're currently between jobs, then this could be something you do. Also look into volunteer work. Another thing you can do is put the skills section first rather than employment. So that will highlight the skills that you have rather than draw attention to the employment. If you want to participate in the interactive model, pause the video on the next slide and set a timer for 3 minutes. This is just a job experience activity. On a piece of paper, make 4 columns, label them position, company, dates, and descriptions, and then for the next few minutes, begin filling out the first 3 columns. And you'd want to pause it actually on the following slide. There we go. Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry. So basically, you just want to spend the next 3 minutes filling these out. I'm sorry about that. I thought I had a slide that went into more detail, but yeah, basically all you're just filling out is position, company, and dates. So go ahead and pause the video now. To develop the descriptions of your job, think about these questions. Who, what, where, why, when, and how, the journalistic questions. And then there's more details there. So these are just to help you get started with the descriptions. If you want to participate in the interactive model, pause the video on the next slide and set a timer for 5 minutes. Mark each job that is relevant to your goals and then spend the next few minutes writing up a description of the job in the description column that will emphasize how it is relevant to your goals. Go ahead and pause the video now. All right, so we're going to move into the education section now. What to include? Name of the school, degree or diploma received, years attended, GPA, any special honors or awards, any special classes or projects, or other things relevant to the job you're applying to. Please note that if you have a college degree, you do not need to include high school in this section. One thing that comes up a lot is whether or not to include the graduation date. To help prevent ageism, you might want to consider removing your graduation date from the education section. Laura Slauson, certified professional resume writer and owner of the Creative Advantage, gives the following guidelines. If you have more than 10 to 15 years of experience, put your education at the bottom of your resume without a graduation date. If you have 5 to 7 years of experience, put your education at the bottom of the resume with your graduation date. If you're a recent graduate applying for an entry-level role, place your education at the top of your resume with the graduation date and any relevant coursework that you took. Young applicants, especially members of the Millennial and Generation Z generations, might also want to leave off the graduation date when applying for non-entry-level jobs. Some employers worry that young professionals won't stay at a company for long or view them as too young for a senior level position. It makes sense to include the graduation date, though, if you have recently completed continuing education, such as a master's or PhD, or received certification in a specialty program. Including dates for recent education shows employers you are still invested in staying up to date and willing to learn. If you want to participate in the interactive model, pause the video on the next slide and set a timer for 4 minutes. These are just questions to get you started thinking about your education. Moving on. Important components, skills. This is a great scene from Friends, so I had to include that, about including skills that you don't actually have on your resume. If you have limited job experience, put the skills section before the job experience to highlight your skills. Make sure you're listing skills relevant to the job you're applying for. Try to pull keywords from the job description if possible. Be specific and don't put down skills you don't have. Use the insert table function to format your skills. Remove the visible lines. This stands out and also takes up less room. So it'll look something like this example I have here. If you want to participate in the interactive model, pause the video on the next slide and set a timer for 3 minutes. Take a few minutes to jot down any skills you have that would be valuable in your field. These are just some examples. Think about your field and what would be valuable. Go ahead and pause the video now. All right, so these are some of the other important components that you might want to consider including in your resume. Volunteer work. This is, of course, optional, but it can be good to include this, especially if you do not have a lot of job experience relevant to the job you're applying to, but you have volunteer experience. So, for example, you've never been a manager, but you've led a project team or led a project or a team as a volunteer. It can also be really good to include this if the job you're applying for values community engagement. This is where a little bit of research can go a long way. If the job values community engagement, their staff is always out doing volunteer work, then it can be good to show that you are also invested in that. Various other experiences. Again, this is optional. It can be where you add any information to help you stand out. Label the section according to the information. I have 3 different examples here, but there are different categories beside these. First of all, organizations. If you ran a student organization and have experience from that relevant to the job, you could label that section organizations. This also goes for any other type of club. It doesn't have to be school related. Travel. If you participated in any kind of study abroads or other global awareness programs, you could label that section global awareness. You could talk about how this helps you understand and work with people from other cultures, or how it illustrates that you're comfortable traveling abroad. Research and or presentations. If the job you're applying for involves researching and or presenting, consider listing some recent projects and or presentations to show that you have experience with that and are comfortable with it. All right, so we finished the main part here with the important components. We're going to move into some more specific things with length and design now. These tips come from the Purdue Online Writing Lab. They have a whole section on resumes, and I list them at the end in further resources. I highly recommend that you check out their website. This is their recommendation regarding resume length. Limiting your document to 1 page is a good approach for new college graduates and high school students. Some employers may specifically ask for a 1-page resume. However, do not shy away from adding that extra page of accomplishments as long as it is relevant and persuasive. If you're attending a job fair, one recommendation is that you have a 1-page resume as well as your full resume if you have a resume that's longer than 1 page. So that way, in case you run across the employer who only wants a 1-page resume, you have a shortened version, but then you have your full resume if the employer doesn't have a specification. Here's more details. So the Purdue OWL suggests that people following into these categories utilize 1-page resumes. New high school or college graduates, applicants for entry-level jobs, those pursuing a radical career change where much prior experience is now irrelevant, and those with less than 10 years experience who may benefit from focusing on 1 to 2 former jobs. 2 pages. People falling into these categories should utilize 2-page resumes. Some new college graduates and entry-level job seekers who have enough relevant experience to go on to a 2nd page. Applicants for positions above entry level but below executive level, and applicants to jobs that require technical, engineering, or scientific skills. Finally, 3 pages. This is really rare that you go to 3 pages, but senior level managers or executives will often do 3 pages, as well as applicants to jobs in academic or scientific fields. All right, so next is some design tips. Again, these are adapted from the Purdue OWL. Quadrants. So the Purdue OWL suggests splitting your resume up into quadrants, like this one on the left. The most important information should go in quadrants 1 and 2, since that will be where the reader looks. So that's these top 2 quadrants here. One way to create a balanced page is by using columns to format your text. To ensure that your reader doesn't make too many stops and miss important information, you should use no more than 3 columns on your resume. Remember that the first place your reader looks at will be located in quadrants 1 and 2, so the most important information should go there. Also keep in mind that when indenting information, you might create extra columns, so be aware of your column count. Here's an example of a resume section with 3 distinct columns. The first example has the columns marked in red so that you can see their placement. Note, if you are using this to format, you need to use it for the entire resume. Only using it for part will break up the flow of the reading. I frankly don't use this format, although I think it is a nice clear-cut format. I prefer doing something that's a little more just like 2 columns and with the bullet point list, but it does look nice if you're interested in doing that. It's just a personal choice for me. Fonts. By manipulating the fonts used in your resume, you can easily create a hierarchy of information. In general, fonts are divided into 2 categories, serif and sans serif. Serif fonts keep the eye reading, so they should be used for descriptions. Note that this is mainly for American resumes, so if you're applying for a job in Europe, they might have different standards as far as fonts go. These are some examples of serif fonts. Sans serif makes the eyes stop, so they should be used for headings to help the reader quickly locate information. The key to using fonts in your resume is to be consistent. For example, if you decide to use a sans serif font for a main heading, do so for all of your headings and use the same sans serif font each time. Generally, you should use no more than 2 fonts in your resume. Remember that you want to keep the reader reading. You do not want to create too many tricks for the reader's eye. Other types of emphasis. One way to create emphasis is by using bold, capitalization, italics, and underlining. Your choice for emphasis depends on your personal taste. However, you should not mix methods nor overuse them. You would not, for example, want to capitalize, italicize, and underline pieces of text. Doing so would only make the text less visually pleasing for the reader. In addition, overusing these tools makes the reader ignore the items you wish to emphasize, thus limiting effectiveness. So be sure to carefully choose which information should be emphasized. Finally, the 20-second test. How do you know when you've successfully created an easily read resume that allows employers to process information quickly? Try having someone perform the 20-second test on your resume. Simply time your reader for 20 seconds as he or she reads your resume. What did he or she learn about you? If the reader noticed within 20 seconds what you want employers to learn about you, then most likely you have created an effective resume. If not, try moving important information to the first quadrant, checking that you have used sans serif and serif fonts consistently, and limiting the tools for emphasis you use in your document. As I said, these all come from the Purdue OWL, and they have a couple more design tips if you want to go and check that out, especially if you are sending in online resumes. All right. Last, these are just some general tips that I've learned from helping people write their resumes and also from attending workshops myself. As always, it's good to look up examples of resumes in your field for more specific suggestions. You should have a basic resume to start with, but then you should use the job description to cater the resume to the job. So if people tell you that you need to make different resumes for different jobs, they're right, but it helps to have that base resume and then just save each new one as a new document. You can put the company in the title. So that way you don't have to recreate a resume every time you're applying for something. Use keywords that you see in the job description, and this is especially important if you're submitting a resume online. Bots often scan resumes for keywords to determine eligibility before an actual person even reads them. If you're submitting a printed resume, print it on thicker paper if possible. This helps prevent wrinkling and also gives a professional appearance. When writing your resume, try to use short phrases rather than sentences. That's mostly for the descriptions. Determine what experience is relevant to the job you're applying for. Say that again and again. It's really important. Keep your tenses consistent. This one can sneak up on you, especially if you are just building your resume as you go along. You want to use either past or present in each section. If you're submitting digitally, save your resume as a PDF. This ensures that the formatting will be exactly the way you want it and that any computer will be able to open it. I've seen things that were formatted on Microsoft Word, but then when I tried to open it on a different type of computer using a different program, all the formatting was strange. It just didn't work out. So by saving it as a PDF, it helps prevent that. The last thing you want is a resume that looks beautiful on your computer and that looks really wonky on someone else's. Avoid using a lot of jargon that only people in a particular field would understand. So this one's a little bit tricky because you want to show that you know your field. So you can use specific names of programs or tools, but you don't want to use a lot of jargon because keep in mind that maybe the hiring manager, although they work in that field, isn't out there actually working with the materials and the programs that you're working with. So you want to make sure that you're showing you understand the different programs or the different tools, but that's not off-putting to whoever's reading the resume. Make sure that you follow a consistent format. Use the same font, line spacing, and bullet points, and make sure your bullet points line up throughout the entire resume. One way to check that is to print it off and get a ruler and just draw a line. Make sure that they're all on that line. This is actually a problem that I had with my resume that I built. For some reason, they kept slightly indenting. So by the time you got to the bottom of the resume, they were probably a good ½ an inch off from what they were at the top. Design your resume for the job you're applying for. For most jobs, a traditional resume is best. For certain jobs that focus on creativity and design, consider using a more innovative template. You can also use a more innovative template for traditional jobs or for like regular jobs, not ones that are creative. But you just want to be really careful with how you're using it to make sure it's still emphasizing the information you want. I have some examples of different types of resumes coming up here in a couple of minutes. These are specifically for online resumes. When submitting a resume online, try to avoid punctuation as much as possible. Sometimes computer scanning might miss keywords if they have a period or a comma next to them. Avoid using graphics, lines, and boxes, and always include keywords from the job description. All right. So here's some resources, and this is where I have examples. Now that we've covered the essential components and other important factors for building a resume, here are some examples as well as further resources to guide you. These come from the Purdue OWL and the website Resume Genius. Resume Genius has several free templates that you can download and use to create your own resume. So this is you can't see the top one, but it's a skills-based resume. So this would be where you put your skills at the top of the resume rather than job experience. So if you see here, she has professional goal, education, and then skills because she doesn't have a lot of relevant work experience. This one is chronological resume. So she's got her education at the top. Or he, I should say, he has his education at the top and then work experience. All right, so this is starting to come from Resume Genius. So this is a more traditional resume. Then we have something that's a little more creative. So this is still pretty close to the traditional, but you see we got some color coming in, a different way of highlighting the skills. Then we get increasingly more creative. So like I said, if you feel that you can still highlight the relevant information using a format like this, it will help your resume stand out because it will be different. But what I've been told is that you need to be really careful with the way you use it because it can become distracting and employers can miss the important information that you're actually trying to highlight. Here's another example. So again, this is more traditional. This one has a sidebar. Sidebars can be really good if they're used well, but they can be really distracting and actually hurt your chances if they're used incorrectly. All right, so these are just some further resources. Ipsy Writes is a free community writing center. They're based out of Ypsilanti, but they will work with people in Washtenaw County. And they have their website's right there. You can submit a resume and someone will take a look at it and give you feedback, or you can also meet with them just meet with them virtually as long as COVID's going on. Usually they have a drop-in writing center, but that's currently closed. Resume Genius, as I said, that's a great place to go for resume templates. Scannable online resumes, I mentioned that earlier, that's on the Purdue OWL, as well as resume designs and sample resumes. And then I have all of my sources that I used to build this workshop listed here at the end. And those are all great resources. So I'll make sure to spend a couple seconds on each slide. Most of these come from Indeed or Top Resume or the Purdue OWL. All right, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope that you have great luck writing your resume and that you found this workshop to be helpful. Have a great day.